You're now watching the Danny Mac Podcast on the Bet Rivers Network.
And welcome back to the Danny Mac Podcast on the Bet Rivers Podcast Network. Glad you're with me as we continue to inch our way toward the Tennessee Titans when they come rolling in for the opener at Soldier Field. We have one more dress rehearsal left to go for the Bears, and then we get on to playing for real. And man, I can't wait until that happens. Enough words already. Let's talk college and pro football with the guy who understands the game backwards and forwards. A guy who was expected to set the world on fire when he came out of Washington State in the late 1990s. These days, Ryan Leaf keeps his eyes on college and pro football for Westwood One and a number of different media outlets. And Ryan, I enjoyed your work on Good Morning Football late last season. That looked like it was going to be something, but then again, the NFL Network slams the brakes on my favorite morning show. So that's not happening. But anyway, it was good to have you in my Week 17, Week 18 mornings, man.
No, it was good. I got an opportunity to do that for the last 2 years, 2 seasons while living here in New York. I enjoyed working with Jamie and Peter and Kyle and Jason. It was a lot of fun. I'll miss those guys. They get the luxury of having to wake up at like 2 a.m. Pacific time now. So that's on them. But yeah, I'm excited for the NFL season too. The Chicago Bears are a fun watch. I've been speaking with Ken Rogers quite a bit, the head of NFL Films. They're having a lot of fun filming Hard Knocks this year with that team.
I would have to think so. It's a team that seems to be perfect for that type of a show because everybody seems to like the limelight, including the quarterback. He's not backed off of any of this. What do you think of Caleb Williams so far?
I think Caleb Williams has been prepped for this since he was a child, really. This has been through Elite 11, his time as a freshman at Oklahoma, then to USC, the Heisman Trophy, everything that has gone into what has prepared Caleb Williams for this, I think he has. Now, having said all of that, I think we all are killers and we all are ready to take over the world and set it on fire, like you say. It just all depends on how you deal with adversity. What happens when, he has his first 3 or 4 interception game, right? There's been a ton of speculation around how he handled those things at USC that final year. I didn't think there was anything egregious in how he handled it at all. I thought he did a tremendous job as a leader. But that's always the testament. How do you deal with disappointment, with failure at the highest possible level when every outlet and platform is covering you in the bar that has been set in Chicago for this young quarterback almost seems unsurmountable. So it'll be really telling. They have a interesting first half of the season in comparison to what the second half of the season looks like schedule wise. If they can roll out to an early kind of positive by they head into the second half of the season when they play all of their divisional opponents plus the San Francisco 49ers and the Seattle Seahawks, then you're in for a treat there. I don't think enough has been commented on and talked about in reference to what Ryan Poles has done. This should be a referendum on what Ryan Poles has been able to do as his tenure as the general manager. The fact they didn't move out Justin Fields a year ago to collect the first round draft pick, to be that talented around a first overall draft pick at quarterback, it speaks volumes. Most of those teams that are drafting a guy that high, you're not very good, and you're going to take a little while. This team's a playoff caliber team talent-wise, and so again, those expectations are high.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. I think Poles has done a crazy good job in just 2 years and change. This roster has been completely overturned. I think Patrick Scales, the long snapper, might be the only guy who was on the team as long as 4 or 5 years ago. So he has done it in short order. You can do that in this league with a little bit of luck and a lot of salary cap money. That was in his favor as well. And he did have some luck. He had David Tepper, who is, I like to say, he's the NFL's answer to the genie. And Ryan Poles has been Aladdin. He rubbed the lamp and out come all these wishes. It's really gone his way. Let's talk about adversity and what it meant to Caleb last year against Notre Dame. He threw 3 interceptions. And, man, I've never heard so much doom forecast for a guy for one lousy college football game. And if he shows emotions afterwards, so what? I want my quarterback emotional. I don't want him flappable, but I want him emotional, and that's okay, right?
It is okay. I mean, but we're in a media cycle of of people tweeting from their basements, and it's not all real. The voices that we hear usually aren't necessarily the ones that are meaningful, and they're amplified for whatever reason. I didn't find anything while covering the Pac-12 conference over the last 2 seasons that was in any way egregious in terms of how he handled or was a leader. But again, my time at Washington State, there wasn't any of that. In fact, I was one of the best leaders. I took us to a championship for the first time in 67 years, right? I mean, it's all about what happens next. You start over. It's all a new beginning. He's never been in a position where, he's failed. And I think Peyton Manning spoke to it, so succinctly around what his rookie season meant, right? He failed over and over and over again because failure was the opportunity to do it better the next time. And I just never viewed it as that. I viewed it as a win or a loss. And it just isn't that. This is a marathon. It is not a sprint. And if his team, for some reason, were to be 3-14 this year, which I don't think is any way possible that happening with the defense that they've presented, that has to be a learning experience and one that he has to overcome in a positive way. I don't foresee that. I think if Justin Fields is on this roster, this is a playoff team. So if that says something to you in terms of what I expect this team to be, then Caleb Williams should step into a role with the skill position players that he has around him and be much more successful, be in a position to possibly, I don't know, you could send 3 teams from this division to the playoffs this year with the Lions, the Packers, and the Bears. And I mean, who knows what the Vikings are gonna look like? They were right on the verge again last year too. So it's a very competitive division, and the expectations are very high for Caleb Williams.
I think it's right to set them high. If C.J. Stroud did it last year the way he did with the Texans, and he played in 15 games and threw for 4,100 yards, the Bears franchise record is not that daunting. It's 3,838 yards. That's the fewest yards for any single season record holder in the league. If he's healthy for 17 games, he should do that this year. And I don't think it's too much to ask to say they should go from 7 wins to being a playoff team.
But I don't think people put into consideration the weather that happens in Chicago either. You looked at Houston, and he plays in a dome half the season. It's understandable that you want to run the football. Hey, that's what you want to do. And I do think that Matt Eberflus wants to play good defense, run the football, and ask Caleb Williams not to do too much this year. And I'm sorry if that, doesn't make people or Bears fans happy, but your team is good enough. You need a guy that doesn't make some mistakes. Now, I tell you what, these defensive coordinators are going to have a plan. They're going to understand what makes it really difficult on Caleb Williams. And one of those big things is vacating the pocket out the backside. That's what they're going to want him to do. And that's what he was really good in college at. I don't believe it translates to the NFL. I don't. And so I've seen it a few times already in the preseason. And I'm telling you right now that teams are going to want that. They're going to want him to vacate the pocket out the back, and they believe they'll have won that matchup if that's the case. And so he's got to find a way to find his checkdowns, to step up in the pocket, and be more accurate down the field. Those are the things I want to see in the final preseason game if he does get some run, and then when he steps into the huddle when Week 1 against the Titans comes around.
I think he's had 40 snaps in his two preseason dates. There's a long layoff between this weekend and opening day. Don't you think you have to have a little bit more experience bringing the team in and out of the huddle and up to the line?
I do. I see coaches dealing with the preseason much differently now that you have 3 games, the big layoff in between the third game and the first regular season game. I'm seeing the second game is where players are being held out more. And in the third game, they're most likely going to go the first half, maybe come out at halftime, play a couple series. I think that's important for Caleb Williams. It's also understandable if, hey, it's a long year. It's 17 weeks, 17 games. You're going to get plenty of snaps come Week 1. And we don't want to do anything to damage or put us in a position where you could get hurt.
Let's talk about Rome Odunze. You watched a lot of West Coast football. The 9th player drafted overall, the 4th wide receiver, and some think maybe the best of the bunch. What do you think?
Yeah, I really liked that. I really liked Michael Penix first off, and so the wide receivers that made him great the last 2 years, Rome Odunze was right or near the top. Loved that he fell to the Chicago Bears. When you look at what the skill position players look like DeAndre Swift, DJ Moore, Rome Odunze, Keenan Allen. I mean, they're just loaded. Colin Johnson looked really good in the Canton game in terms of his size and his ability. And you're like, got to look around and like maybe one of those guys doesn't make the roster. To be honest with you, that's how talented they are at the skill positions. So yeah, excited for him. I think there's going to be some learning curve and rookie bumps for Rome, but he's got two of the best in the business teaching him the skill of playing wide receiver in Keenan Allen and DJ Moore. So I don't know if there's a better fit for him and what he does with his skill set.
I don't know if there's ever been a fit for a first-year quarterback more comfortable with the guys around him. Now, the guys up front, maybe not so much, but in terms of receivers and tight ends and running backs, they're stacked.
They are stacked. You don't see this when you have the first overall pick and you draft a quarterback. It's usually bare cupboard, and you have to go find it through the process. And so this is special. And then what Ryan did with the trade for Sweat a year ago, the defense seems strong. I mean, you look at outside the touchdown versus Houston in the Canton game, they've only allowed 6 points over the last two preseason games. And that's significant, right? That's depth. That's second, third, fourth string guys that are there and not allowing any touchdowns over the last two games. And they're scoring a lot of points. So, I mean, I don't want anybody to lose perspective here. They're going up against the Chiefs team next in the preseason. Chiefs haven't won a preseason game yet. They are the preemptive favorite to win the Super Bowl once again for a third consecutive time. So let's, the year we went 1-15, we went 4-0 in the preseason. So let's just, understand what it is. I was a preseason Hall of Famer, right? Let's understand what it is. Okay. Life begins on week 1, and we'll get a better understanding. But if you are a Bears fan out there, you have to be pleasantly, I think, surprised at how well he is. It looks like it's translated from what he did in college to what he did at the next level, and having the skill position players that he has around him, I think is huge. And for whatever reason, Cole Kmet may be the most like affable and personable person I've ever met in my life. He's best friends with every quarterback. He knows he gets it. Like, hey, if Bagent has to get in like he did last year, I'm his best guy, right? If Austin Reed has to get in, we're buddies too. We're going to talk about Love Island or whatever it is on his show. And Cole Kmet is he's a politician. I wouldn't be surprised that guy runs for mayor of Chicago at one point.
Maybe he can get a stadium deal done. That's an issue here. I used to love going to Bears-Chargers games or the Holiday Bowl at the old Jack Murphy Stadium. I still think it's criminal San Diego lost the Chargers.
Well, you enjoyed going to it because guess what? Most people in San Diego were transplants or retirees, and they were fans of different teams. So they weren't necessarily fans of the Chargers. Like when we play the Bears or when we play the Packers, the stadium was filled, 75% of Bears and cheeseheads. That was the problem. Like no one was really invested locally to pay the tax, even though it was a darn hotel tax for people that were going to be visiting and staying in hotels that would ultimately have paid for the stadium. Unfortunately, that didn't stick. San Diego gave me everything. They're now in Los Angeles. They're happy with where they're at. They've got a great quarterback, great head coach. And so it's disappointing because, I thought it was a great fit. But it makes a lot of sense too, when you look at, all the numbers and everything that goes into it, when in reality, it was almost like you were playing 16 road games at times, especially when you went 1-15 that year.
Ryan, let's talk about your life after football and what you're doing now with mental health awareness and in the recovery from addiction community is something that makes you real easy to root for. And that's part of the reason I watched with such interest last year when you were on Good Morning Football. As I mentioned to you before we got started, I am in the club. I'm a recovering pain medication addict. When did it begin to go off the tracks for you, and how long was it before you recognized this wasn't good for you?
Well, I think it goes off the rails pretty quickly once you are willing to, purchase drugs from somebody, or more or less go to a doctor and lie to them and tell them you're in pain. Though realistically, it was an emotional pain that I was trying to cover up. So pretty quickly, you figure it out. But the scary part is like, okay, this is just my life. This is how it is right now. This is how it is. I was playing professional football a year ago, and now I'm this, shut in drug addict. It's I think that's more the frightening piece, that you're just accepting of that this is the new life. Um, and then once you're in it, like the disease takes over. So you have no control at any point after that. You have to be intervened with. And it's rare for those that don't. In my case, I had to be, saved by the local sheriff's department in my hometown. And thank God for them, because it was close. It was close to being the end for me. I'd tried to take my own life. And so, the idea that me being gone was better than the idea of living through what I was living through. And so, um, grateful that it happened. My world doesn't spin without it now, with all the trash, all the scars, all the judgment, all that stuff. It just doesn't spin without it now. So, I didn't think I'd be grateful for having, spent 32 months in prison, and I don't recommend it, but I'm really grateful for it.
Everybody's bottom is different. Some people need to do that. Some people need to go broke, lose their families. Every bottom is different. Describe for us, if you can, what it was like to get to such a low point where you wanted it to be all over with.
I don't know. At the time, it just felt like, life. This is where it's at. You know, there was no forward motion. The only way for me to experience any relief was to numb it. And to numb it was to take the medication. And an opiate addict, we just want to be sedated. And what's the ultimate sedation that you can have is, and it's just not being here anymore, right? It's being completely sedated. So I think that was the ultimate goal, you know, and luckily there was something bigger than me out there that has carried me through. Otherwise, like, I don't see the reason why I'm the one here and someone like my former teammate Junior Seau isn't. That doesn't make sense to me. A lot of times there's a lot of survivor's guilt around that aspect of things. I think his message would be so much more impactful than maybe mine would. So, when you're in it, you don't know what's available. You don't know there's hope. You're just in it. And, it's hard right now to think that that's where you were once. You have to try to go back there and put yourself in your shoes from that time, so you understand what's still out there if you choose to not make the next right choice. That is still there, most likely in a much worse sense. So, but it's hard to even imagine what 9 3/4 years ago was like for me. It hasn't even been a decade since I've been out of prison. Like 10 years ago today, I was sitting in a prison cell still. So, it's amazing what this life has given me in such a short period of time, when I chose to make it about other people and not about myself, and just do the next right thing. It's pretty amazing. And I might be just the luckiest dude in the world, to be honest with you.
Do you still go to meetings regularly?
Yeah, I have to. I have to be reminded of. It's more about hearing what I need to hear. Like, I need to hear the newcomer walk in that room and tell me about the struggle over the last week, just trying to stay sober for a day, because I was there and I know that's still a reality. And so that's incredibly important to hear that. To know that could be me tomorrow if I don't do exactly what I'm supposed to do every single day. Because people always ask me the question, what's 5 years look like from you? And I'm like, I'll probably be back in prison. And they look at me shocked, and I'm like, well, that's the evidence of my whole life. I don't make the proper choices. So, but if I do today what I did yesterday, that most likely won't be the issue. I don't have the luxury of looking ahead 5 years. Like, I'm gonna do today. This is the best that I can. And when I screw up, because we all do. We're all flawed human beings trying to be better. When I screw up, I'll make amends. I'll be, I'm much more self-aware than I ever was before, I think is the best point.
It does require constant work. And I think a lot of people who don't completely understand, and some who even do, think it's like a fix. I went through rehab and, I'm 60 days clean. And then they have that trust factor. Maybe I could just have one or two.
Yeah.
And that might work for a little bit, but guess what's coming in a year? Back to where you were and then some.
It might work for someone. I have no idea. I've talked to a few people that went like cold turkey on their own and figured it out without any. They're amazing to me. They're like a miracle. In my case, I had to be intervened with. I need constant support around it, and I need to work a program, and I need to make it about other people. Like if once I start making it about me, then old behavior crops up. Like the drug was never the problem. That was just a symptom. I was always the problem. And so I've had to constantly work on me. And to do that, it couldn't be about me anymore. It had to be about other people. And that's what I've tried to do. Some days I fall short of that, but that's what I try to do. And it's good to have a family, I had a baby girl about 9 months ago, and I'm gonna be an old dad. I'm gonna be 65 when she graduates high school and stuff. So, I want to be around, and I want to be the best possible version I can be. And to do that, I have to make it all about them and everybody else. So,
what advice would you give to somebody who's giving their life consideration? It is about, hey, I should park this because I find myself feeling some of the ways Ryan Leaf has just described.
well, it's you don't have to do it alone, and you're not like unique. I used to think I was like, no, how could anybody ever know what I'm going through? No one else is the second pick in the NFL draft and had all these expectations and all this nonsense. Like if you go into an AA meeting and listen to anybody's story, that's my story. Okay. There may be some unique qualifiers to mine because of the NFL and things like that, but it's my story. So, you have a choice in asking for help. It's the strongest thing you'll ever do. And we're here to help you. We want you to have the life of your dreams. And, you may not imagine that, you may not see that, or there might not be any hope. And I think that's what we're constantly looking for is some sort of hope. And once I found that, and there was just a semblance of that to cling on to, that was enough to get it started. And then you have to make it from that point on. And it's a day-to-day thing. You can't think about what it looks like, like I said, 5 years from now. You can't be worried about like, hey, when I suggest to you, you need to go to treatment, and they're like, no, I'll lose my job. And I'm like, well, you're going to lose your job anyway. You're gonna lose it anyway. So at least in this way, which I believe most companies should be this because of the healthcare, is that you should be allowed to go and seek treatment for a disease that you have. And so that's important to understand. It's also the stigma, and I think that may be the biggest issue in all of this. The stigma is what's limiting people from getting the help that they need. They're more fearful that someone may know that they need help than actually going and getting the help that they need. That's what stigma is. It's the reason why it will continue to maintain and stick around for as long as it is, because when two kids get sick on a block in a neighborhood, one gets leukemia and one gets a substance use disorder, there is an absolute different response from people in the community, right? People are there to support the family with the cancer diagnosis, with the substance use disorder diagnosis. They're nowhere to be found. They're isolated. They're almost ostracized. They're judged. And there's nothing different. There's nothing different. They're both diseases. It's been like that in the medical journals for forever. It's science. And once we start looking at that as a treatable disease, it will be viewed much differently. And people are more willing to step forward and say, hey, I deal with alcoholism, or I deal with a substance use disorder, or I have a mental health illness, and we're treating it, and everybody's excited about that. And that's what stigma is, and it limits. And so that's a big part of my mission too, is to destroy the stigma that exists out there around mental illness and substance use disorder.
And it can be incredibly liberating, as daunting as it is to make that public announcement. I think once it's made, at least that was my experience, I felt a lot of weight off my shoulders. And I know now that I'm a suspect everywhere I go. People are going to look and see if my eyes are all puffy and I've been up all night. And that's just the way it is. Maybe I needed that. Maybe most of us need that.
Well, the thing about it for me is that I was already a very public person. That wasn't going to go away. Every draft season, my name's brought up and stuff. So there was needed to be a way to take the power away from all of this. And the simple fact for me, it was to be open and honest about it, to be transparent, be vulnerable. Because like Eminem's character B Rabbit at the end of 8 Mile, he just owns it all. And no one can ever come after me for anything. I've owned everything. I've been accountable. I understand my part in it. I really like the guy I see in the mirror now, regardless of the judgment of the scars. What's ironic is that I'm more confident in who I am as a person than I ever was as an NFL quarterback, and which is crazy. You were just so your self-esteem and your ego and your pride and everything is so convoluted when you're an NFL quarterback. Everybody's telling you the greatest thing in the world, 2 weeks later telling you the worst thing that ever came to be in the NFL. So that's an astonishing revelation. The fact that all my scars and all my dirty laundry and everything is out there for public consumption has made me more confident is almost an oxymoron, but it's the truth. The fact that this all about me and I'm still okay with that, there's a lot of confidence in that when you stand up in front of a room full of people.
Yeah, good stuff. Hey, Ryan, great catching up. Thanks so much for the visit. Continued success one day at a time, and hopefully I'll be in touch down the road. We could talk about Caleb Williams as the Bears finally hit the divisional schedule in late November. I got
the Thanksgiving Day game, Bears at Lions, so I'll be there calling that game in Detroit.
Oh, terrific. That's all. Many a Thanksgiving ruined for Bears fans.
It could be different. That could be a different one. That could be a really great opportunity. I'm excited for that one.
Oh, good deal. Ryan, thanks a bunch for the time. Enjoyed it enormously. Have a great day.
You bet. Thank you.
Ryan Leaf, he's with Westwood One, the former number 2 pick in the draft out of Washington State many years ago. I want to thank Randy Merkin, who gets me all of these A-level guests for the podcast. Sam Michael is our executive producer. And Adam Delavitt is Baby Capone, as I like to refer to him. He runs the show for Bet Rivers. Hall of Famer Richard Dent is around the corner right here on the Danny Mac Podcast on the Bet Rivers Podcast Network.